Do you ever think to yourself, man, I see these motorcycles and they think they can do whatever the heck they want to? Well, yeah, there are things that motorcyclists can do that car and truck drivers cannot. And that's what we're going to talk about today as I give you 7 of those things. Now, what I want to do is provide some context why motorcyclists do these things, and hopefully I get a ton of people in here that have never ridden a motorcycle, and then that way maybe you will kind of better understand why it is we do some of these things. Maybe it'll change your opinion, maybe not. But whether you ride a motorcycle or you don't, let me know if you think any of these things are super beneficial to you, and also how often do you use some of the things we're going to talk about to your advantage because you are a motorcyclist. Leave that down below as well. Let's go and jump right in. The first one is running red lights. Yes, in a handful of states, there you are actually allowed to run a red light on a motorcycle. Now, some states have a little bit different variations on when you can run the red light. Like in South Carolina, for instance, I think you got to sit at the light for like 120 seconds before you can actually run that red or treat it like a stoplight. Dead on red is what these laws are sometimes referred to. And essentially, on a motorcycle, you're, a third the width of a regular car. So those little lines that are in the road at intersections, of course, are sensors. And that tells the sensors, hey, we have cars here waiting, so you need to make sure that you're switching the light every once in a while. Well, we can't always set those things off. Even with big baggers, it's hard for us to set them off. Sometimes you'll see motorcyclists that don't know about this law. They'll pull up as far as they can. They'll kind of motion for the car to come behind them to get up close to actually touch those sensors. I've done this in the past. But again, in some of these states, you can, if it's clear and you've been there for a certain amount of time, whatever your state says, then you can treat that stoplight like a stop sign and proceed on your way. Another thing that motorcycles can do that car and truck drivers can't is lane split. I've talked about this several times on this channel, and I will continue to talk about it because it is 100% one of those things that every state in the union should pass. There's too many motorcyclists that get hit from behind in stop and go traffic, and this is the reason lane splitting is legal. Again, it's only legal in one state, which is California, but still, which is one of the few things I do like about California law, by the way. But regardless, it is one of those beneficial things, right? Now, again, in California, you can do it under a certain speed limit, so it's not like you can be splitting lanes at 60, 70 miles per hour. And yes, motorcycles will utilize this unique ability that we all have because, again, we can kind of squeeze by cars and trucks because of the smaller profile of our vehicle, right, of our motorcycles. And so you're taking a chance if you do that. But there have been times, right, especially when we came back, I think, from Daytona, where we actually utilized part of the emergency lane because it was backed up for miles and miles and miles. And sometimes you take a chance doing that, of course, but then also you take a chance being in stop and go traffic as well, because all it takes is for one person behind you on their cell phone and stop and go traffic and they claim they never saw you. Even sitting over the far left or right hand part of the lane sometimes can't keep you from being seen. And I mean, how many times have you seen just regular car and trucks being hit from behind, and then the car driver's like, I never saw him, or I couldn't stop in time, or whatever they say. Just imagine what it's like on a motorcycle. So being able to utilize this, especially, under like 40 miles an hour, I think is what it is in California, is so crucial, and it keeps motorcyclists safe as long as drivers are looking out for them. That's another part of this. Drivers have to know the law about this too. There's still so many videos out there you can find of motorcyclists lane splitting where it's legal, right? And they still get called out by other drivers saying that they're being unsafe when it's actually quite the opposite. Another thing that people are surprised that motorcyclists can do that just regular car drivers cannot is utilize HOV lanes. So high occupancy vehicles that are marked with a diamond in some states, right, that actually have congestion issues that they're worried about, and better way of thinking than South Carolina as far as our roads, that's for sure. Actually will utilize these lanes. These lanes allow you to again, kind of bypass some of the regular traffic. So buses, cars, carpooling, that kind of stuff, and yes, even motorcycles. So you may say, well, motorcycles, that's only one person. How are they allowed to use something that's for a high occupancy, right? That's only one person. What the heck are you talking about? Well, because motorcycles take up very little space. And again, this is a congestion thing, right? These are places where you don't really want more congestion, right? You want to be able to ease some of that for a lot of drivers. Well, there you go. And motorcycles are one of the most efficient vehicles on the road. Imagine kind of, I don't know, in my head, I think of what a morning commute would look like if we replaced just 25% of vehicles with motorcycles. I mean, you would probably almost never have bumper to bumper type of traffic, right? You may think of other countries like, I don't know, India and other places like that where, you know, there's motorcycles just dipping and diving everywhere, right? There's no stoplights, there's no nothing, you know, you just kind of make your own rules. But it wouldn't be like that, right? You'd still have the rules of the road and everything we have here in the United States, but you'd still have a heck of a lot less congestion. So if you see a motorcycle in an HOV lane, you may think, oh, that guy's just doing whatever the heck he wants to. But yes, motorcycles are allowed, again, depending on the state, but motorcycles are generally allowed in HOV lanes. There's also some toll roads. Now, this is not as widely accepted as I hope it would be. I don't really deal with tolls in my daily commute where I live, but most states have tolls of some kind, right? But there's places like North Carolina that will allow motorcyclists to travel on specifically I-77, maybe other areas on in North Carolina where motorcyclists don't have to pay for the tolls. It might just be I-77. And then parts of I-95 don't have tolls on motorcycles. Other parts do. You have places like New York that will charge you like half the rate of what it would be for a normal car. And then some places will charge you based on just a 2-axle vehicle. Other places like Michigan don't have toll roads, but they have toll bridges. And there may even be some toll roads that you're not allowed to travel on as a motorcycle. You may be able to use the express lanes in Colorado. The point is, every state is so wildly different when it comes to motorcycles, but fortunately there are some good areas that recognize motorcycles are not the cause of congestion, and they're surely not the cause of roads being torn up, especially when you compare that to, you know, tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, right? Guys that we need, of course, but they do the majority of the damage, and cars in general, right? So unfortunately, it is kind of one of those hit or miss things, right? If you travel in Tennessee or some of the other states that don't have tolls, that's fantastic. And Tennessee actually has some really nice roads, but there's a lot of places that don't have tolls that have terrible roads, but whether or not you have to pay them on a motorcycle, there's some areas you can use the express lanes and you don't have to worry about it, while others can. Fortunately, in some places though, we either get a discount or we can travel in the express lanes, unlike other cars. Another thing that motorcycles can do that you absolutely cannot in a car or truck, and this is just, well, based on the fact you're driving a car or truck, is use all parts of the lane. So you will see some motorcycles go from the left side of the lane, middle, to the right side of the lane, and you may think, oh, they're just showing off. I don't, you know, what are they doing? You know, they're just kind of going back and forth, back and forth. And depending on the conditions, I will do this at times as well. And essentially what good motorcycles or motorcyclists are doing is looking for the best vision for up the road. Because one thing you don't necessarily have to consider when you're in a car or a truck is, you know, that pipe that's in the middle of the road like a mile up, or that piece of wood, or that roadkill, or whatever it may be. Where in a car or truck, it may damage something, right? It may knock some of your little protection under the vehicle, some of the little plastic components loose, right? Or maybe it even causes a little more damage than that. Maybe it just scares the crap out of you. Well, on a motorcycle, that can literally put you down. And of course, the faster you're going, the more you want to be paying attention to this stuff, and the further ahead you want to be looking up the road. So us being able to use all parts of the lane is actually vital for us to be safe. It's not just us going back and forth trying to show off for anybody. It's literally our way of being able to see what's upcoming and trying to get the best vision we possibly can and seeing as far up the road as we possibly can as well. Now, another thing that we actually have access to that a lot of cars and trucks do not is specific motorcycle parking. Now, whenever I see an establishment that has motorcycle parking, it always, I don't know, you probably have the same feeling if you ride a motorcycle. You're like, oh man, this is kind of cool. You know, it's kind of special because it makes you feel like the owner of the establishment actually cares about bikes. And in a world, especially in the United States, where it seems like motorcyclists can get the raw end of the deal, it's always just a breath of fresh air to see that some of these places do respect motorcyclists. And so while you will see some motorcycles take advantage of certain parking situations, you might see them park in between, like the blue painted lines, right, that are in between the handicap parking, right? You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to really park up on a sidewalk, although there might be some places that do let you park on the sidewalk, but that would be kind of the exception. But there are some places, and I'm not just talking about biker bars, but there are some places that actually have motorcycle specific parking because they know they can get a lot of us in the front of the store or the front of the establishment, and we're really not going to take up that much room. So it's kind of a cool nod, and you'll see this a lot during bike weeks and stuff like that. You'll see some places that actually accommodate motorcycles more than others. Now, here's another one that I can't see anybody getting mad over. Technically motorcycles can't use the emergency lane or sidewalks. But one thing we have is the option of escape routes and space, right? And so if there's a car barreling up behind me and I have access to a sidewalk, am I going to use that? Absolutely, 100% of the time. Emergency lane, right? Again, somebody barreling up behind you on the interstate, right? I've used those emergency lanes. Sometimes I use those emergency lanes assuming there's not an emergency going on, right? I'll use those. We'll kind of pull over, stretch our legs for a minute, get back on the road. But the point is, when you ride a motorcycle, you have access to places that a lot of other drivers just simply don't have, right? Where some drivers, they see somebody coming up from behind them and they're in stop and go traffic, they're just gonna have to take the brunt of whatever comes. I mean, there was one I saw the other day. I don't think I probably even explained it on YouTube without getting this video totally demonetized, but it was just awful. I mean, this car was literally just crushed between tractor trailers. I mean, it really was quite terrible. So in a car, in a truck, the options are limited. Where on a motorcycle, assuming that you're paying attention, you really do have a lot more options than what any of the other drivers on the road have. And then the last thing we'll talk about is simply the experience. You may think that going to the mountains is a cool experience, which it absolutely is. No matter if you're in a car, truck, motorcycle, whatever. You may think, going out west or going on a long road trip in a car is fun, which yes, it absolutely can be. On a motorcycle though, it's a little bit different experience. For instance, when I go to the mountains on the motorcycle, I get a sense of kind of all of the different elements as I'm going through it. And what I mean by that is you'll kind of feel like these temperature changes through the mountains. When you're in a car, you really don't get that. You're kind of like, oh, it's a little chillier or whatever. That's what you may think. But on a bike, you actually experience these kind of warm spots through the mountain and then these cooler areas through the mountain. You experience what these turns are actually like on a two-wheeled vehicle where for instance, you get this butt puckering effect when you run off the side of a road and a little bit of a washout and you have a mountain over here and a 2-lane road over here and, simple little guard railing, and you have to correct that or your bike goes down type of situation. I know that sounds very specific and, well, yes, I know all about this, right? That was my first time on a curvy road. I made a whole video about it. So there are experiences that you get on a bike when you go certain places that you just don't get anywhere else. I took some footage. There's a place called Barbarossa's, and I think it was actually North Carolina, Tennessee border right in there. Absolutely beautiful. Now it's a gravel road, right? So you go down, it's kind of steep, right? So you go down there and you're on the bike, and I went there actually during the day, during a weekday, right? I was filming video, of course, and you just imagine this place filled up with motorcycles on a fall night or whatever. There's just a different feeling about it. Riding out in Sturgis, right, and getting to experience all these things for the first time, right, and going to Mount Rushmore, and just even something as simple as riding on the grass in the buffalo chip to get to the campsite. There's some people that actually are camped out, right? They're experiencing everything, right, in the blazing sun, and they're sitting there in a tent, no AC, no nothing, just enjoying frickin' life. And sometimes I feel like you just get a little bit closer to the environment. I mean, literally, physically, but also just in a more, some people would call it a spiritual state or just a mental state. You kind of get a little closer. You get a little bit more appreciation, too, for what some of these roads and places have to offer on a motorcycle. You can't replicate that in a car or a truck. I find it hard to do that, right? Because again, you're connected to this machine, and this machine is exposed to everything, right? So Iron Mountain Road, that is the perfect example. That whole day was actually just a wild day where it was kind of hot, it was humid. Got a buffalo burger, which was freaking awesome. First time I ever had one of those. And then, we get these extreme weather events where it's like hailing up the road, and then the hail clears, and then it's sunshine, and you see Mount Rushmore. And all of this you get to experience on a motorcycle. And it's some of these kind of, I don't know, I want to say butt-puckering events, right? Where it's pouring down rain, you're on this road you've never been on, but then it clears up into sunshine, and that's kind of how motorcycles are for me. It's almost a sense of accomplishment that, man, I did that, right? And the connection that you get along the way, there's really nothing like it. So that is one of the coolest things about motorcycles that we get to experience that a lot of car riders don't. But of course, I want to hear some of your experiences. What are some things that you do on a motorcycle that car drivers, truck drivers cannot do? Leave those down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.